talk with Nikhil because he has been alumni of Purnima, and they were very delighted to have him on with us, all of us. So participants, the artificial intelligence and machine learning have become a buzzword recently. They have changed the way of our lives by simulating human intelligence and capabilities through machines. Hence, this webinar is organized to understand broad topics in AI and machine learning. You all will also understand some practical ways of using AI and machine learning in business and general life. Webinar will also throw light on how engineering students can prepare themselves to deal with the shift in job market and skills required to keep up with the advancement in AI and ML. So now, may I take the privilege of requesting Dr. Mahesh Bundele, Director and Principal, Purnima College of Engineering, to propose welcome speech to the gathering. Under his leadership and guidance, Purnima College of Engineering is scaling new heights. Please, sir.
Yeah, good morning, one and all. It's our privilege that our own alumni of 2005 batch, Mr. Nikhil Gulati, is going to deliver a webinar on preparing for the future with AI. As everybody knows, that irrespective of discipline, irrespective of the branch of engineering, the AI, artificial intelligence, is taking space in all the corners of, you can say, technology and applications. So all the applications are being worked out with AI, and there is a very bright future of AI. I hope that Nikhil Gulati will be focusing much upon the future of AI, and the students what they need to learn from the beginning to the end of their degree course, and how do they should prepare for AI so that they are proficient enough to get placed in the AI based companies like Amazon, Google, and many more. So, in fact, uh, now AI is not a tool remaining with only computer science students, but AI is being used by all the disciplines of engineering and applications, whether it's mechanical engineering, whether for robotics and automation, process automation, and new additive manufacturing processes, CNC, and everything, everywhere artificial intelligence, even in small gadgets, our home appliances, everywhere now artificial intelligence is there. If you see the refrigerator, it's coming with a whole computer motherboard along with many sensors and some AI features. Your mobile phones are coming with AI features, automatically sensing the data, sensory data, and then giving some kind of inputs to you. So artificial intelligence is very important these days, and I hope that it has a future of next 25 to 50 years, 40, 50 years. It will be there in the yeah, world, and everybody will be working and giving new and new technologies, tools, and applications, devices, gadgets for we all. So I am thankful to Nikhil Gulati for accepting our invitation, and I hope that he will be kind enough to support the students as alumni of Purnima College of Engineering. And I am thankful to Dr. Nilam Chaplot from CSC and Dr. Viren Santani and Surendra Yadav. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So before starting the session, I am extremely delighted and happy to take this opportunity to introduce our expert of the day, Dr. Nikhil Gulati, Senior Director, Baker Hughes. He is machine learning and engineering leader, driven to build great products and leading great teams to deliver long-term values for customers worldwide. He has been associated with various organizations of repute from last 15 years. Currently, he is working as Senior Director, Data Science, Baker Hughes, San Francisco Bay Area. Previous to that, he was associated with GE Digital as Technical Lead of Data Science and Analytics. He led multiple technical teams to develop and deliver functional analytics and data products for GE's customer across industry verticals such as grid and utilities, health and oil gas, project charter, technical strategies, and execution processes. He has acted as an effective liaison between engineering, data science, and marketing sales team. Develop internal tools and infrastructure for rapid model development and deployment. He has 2 patents under his belt. First, reconfigurable antennas for performance enhancement of interference networks employing interference alignment. And second one, method for selecting a state of a reconfigurable antenna in a communication system via machine learning. He has various research published in IEEE Transaction and various journals of high repute. He completed his MS and PhD from Drexel University of Electrical Engineering on topic signal processing and machine learning. And of course, he has done BE from Electronics Instrumentation and Control in 2005 from Purnima College of Engineering, which is a great achievement for all of us to have him over here with us. I'm quite sure that you all must be eagerly waiting to hear him. So without taking much of your time, I will hand over the session to Dr. Nikhil Gulati. So
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Chaprod, and thank you so much, Dr. Bundele, for this warm welcome and for this introduction. I am actually very delighted and glad to connect back with the Purnima after such a long time, and especially in this fashion. So it is my pleasure and my privilege actually to be here today and be able to talk to the panelists and to the students. And also big thanks to Dr. Rekha Nair to to arrange this, and she's the one who approached me, and I think I'm glad that I accepted the invitation. I would have not said no anyways. So I hope this would be a fruitful session for students. My talk's not going to be very technical. I believe there has been few other sessions for the students. I will try to talk very broadly about the field and what's real, what's not, and it's a part topic about AI, but also a part talk about how do you achieve success in any career that you wish to pursue, whether it's in AI or any related field. So I hope at the end of the talk we would have some interesting questions that I can hopefully answer from the audience here. Okay, so I'll start, and I hope everyone can see my screen and hear me okay. Okay, great. So what do we want to learn today? I thought about it a little bit. I figured let's start by kind of understanding and deconstructing this whole AI debate and a hype, and what's current state of the art, not necessarily going in applications. I think we all are getting very familiar with our day-to-day interaction with systems that involve machine learning and AI. And so I'll talk about a little bit about the foundational technologies, where we are heading, what is my take of the areas that have probably most impact in the next 10 years. As Dr. Bundele mentioned, I think AI and ML is going to, and is already touching most fields that you can imagine, from manufacturing, to computer science. We already know that. Manufacturing is actually quite close to my heart because I spent about 3-4 years there building systems for our manufacturing companies. So that's the truth. But I will pick 3 areas that I think have the most impact, and some of the applications around that. And I want to go and talk about what we learn in engineering. 15 years ago, I never thought where what I will do. I mean, I had some idea, but my focus was mostly around skills and what I can learn and continue doing that. So I think I want to talk about that and leave you with some lessons that worked for me. I'm sure that you would have your own lessons that you can carry on. So a little bit of my introduction, I think that was covered very well by Dr. Chaplot. I mean, I'm just going to briefly talk about my current role. In my current role, I have a large team that I manage, and I'm responsible for both the strategy and the execution for this company called Baker Hughes. It's actually the world's largest energy technology company. Last year, we have set very high goals for ourselves to become carbon neutral by 2050. And there's a lot of effort is done on the core technologies, whether it's oil field equipment, oil field services, but most of it is driven by data. And the AI is certainly going to play a big role in making that energy transition over time. Another reason for me to highlight this is you won't hear about the company like this or these type of companies a lot. You would hear about all the tech giants, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Uber, but to be able to connect that fact that AI is actually going to have a much bigger disruption in the non-traditional industries is the key takeaway that I want everyone to have by the end of this talk. That don't think that unless you were working for Amazon or unless you're working for Google, I mean, those are great companies, you would not have opportunities in other industries. And in my path, whether it was from GE or before that as a software engineer, I think I've gone from an engineering degree to doing some research, then going into software, then back to research. And then in applied science, I call this whole data science and AI as an applied science business. And learning more about the business, because unless you learn more about the business, you can't really create an impact from the technologies like ML and AI. A couple of turning points for me in my career has been, doing research. And before that, when I was a software engineer in a financial company, I realized that data, this was 2007 and 8, right after my master's, I realized that data is going to be this big thing. So I had this decision to make, should I just continue in industry or do I go back to school and take risks? So I actually left my very well running job and quit it and went back to PhD. Bit of a risk there, but I took it and I think it paid off because I focused back on, even in electrical engineering, I stayed very true to being an electrical engineer. I know there's a lot of computer science people here on the call, but I went back and I applied the skills that I already had, and I learned new ones around machine learning, signal processing, and then it helped eventually for me to bring all these things together and get a job that excited me. So my lesson here is you have to sometimes evaluate where you are and whether you can take certain risks so that you can shift the direction of your career, so that you can think 5 to 10 years down the lines. You can't predict it, I mean, no pun intended here, but you can always take an educated guess at what's most important to build the skill set that you may want. Okay, so going into the meat of the presentation here, I want to first address this whole idea of what is AI, and there is still some definitional challenge here. People define it in a different way, and there's a traditional definition of weak AI, core AI, artificial intelligence, general intelligence that we would be indistinguishable. The machines would be indistinguishable from humans. I don't typically talk about those definitions. Essentially, it's AI is not one thing; it's a range of unrelated technologies that are all coming together now to solve various problems in the society, in business, and some human problems, right? So it's actually making machines intelligent, but the intelligence is quantified slightly in a different way, so that you can appropriately function and with some foresight and some reasoning within the environment that you're set up. So I like this definition very much. Actually, it's still grounded. It is not lofty, and it kind of helps you understand that what's the intention when we talk about AI in the context of enterprise, for example, or AI in the context of society. We are not talking about AI in the context of Terminator or a robot who is just going to take over, right? We hear a lot about that as well. So there's a lot of hype about AI, and I believe it's real because the impact is real. On the right side, if you see, there's this thing called hype cycle, and Gartner builds his hype cycle every few years from different fields. For artificial intelligence, they have one from 2020, and the key point to note here is all these dots on this curve. This is the curve for the hype cycle. That there is an innovation that starts, and then you have this peak of expectations from that technology that it's going to solve all these problems, and then eventually, the technologies get mature and they have this plateau. Most of the technologies that are related to AI, whether it's neuromorphic hardware or deep neural networks, ASICs, and augmented intelligence, they're all in the early phase of this curve, which basically means is you are about at the minimum 10 years or 20 years from being plateaued. That means for them to mature. That means for them to really make an impact, you are looking at 20, 30 years in the making. Even though we hear a lot about that in marketing, they are nowhere close to mature, which is a good thing, because that means you have your 30-year career that you can plan right out of college if you're interested in any of these topics. So there is a lot of room to grow. Nothing is going to die off soon, right? And if you look at the impact is phenomenal. There is a direct impact on standard of living, on the workforce efficiency. We are already doing things more efficiently these days. Data is enabling all of that. The machine learning behind various systems is enabling all of that. Some of it is intrusive, but most of it is very helpful. For example, you just call a cab Uber right now, and just the efficiency is pretty high. And this is all creating new jobs. There's a lot of concern that the AI will actually replace humans and take over their jobs. I don't believe that. I think it's going to create new jobs, because more workforce needs to be added to actually build these systems, sustain them, and really change the way business works on a day-to-day basis. Dr. Chaplot, I just want to check one thing. We are taking the questions at the end, right? Okay. So as I said, and as even Dr. Bundele mentioned in the beginning, that most industries are now being transformed with these technologies in machine learning and AI. And I don't think I can talk about all these industries.
Can I interrupt you for a minute, Nikhil?
Sure.
Yeah, what you have actually, I was muted, so the answer I gave you were not able to hear. But we are planning to take questions in the end. But in between, if anybody is typing in the questions, I will definitely inform you, so that you can answer on that time if it is related to the topic which you are taking currently. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Will it be okay?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. All students are requested to type in their questions through chat window or question answer board. I will be keeping an eye on both the places. So please put in your questions over there, so that I can hand it over to Dr. Nikhil. Thank you. You can start off.
Thank you. So as I was saying, I don't think it's possible to cover all the industries and the impact and how they would transform in this presentation. So I kind of picked my top 3 from my experience, and where I think the focus should be. And they're also kind of in the reach. There's a lot of work already going on. It seems like they would mature better and have a better impact than some of the other ones. Transport, I think everyone is hearing a lot about autonomous vehicles, level 5, level 6, 7 without any human. And we are also talking about beyond that, fleets of autonomous vehicles on the streets. So even though they are not here yet, but I think they would have a very drastic change in how mobility works for humans, and how we would alleviate some of our traffic and congestion problems, which are huge problems because they have direct impact on our health, on our efficiency, and on pollution. So I think there's a good chance that the problems in transportation would be solved by AI much faster than any other place. The second one is healthcare, and I really like this. I think not enough focus being given to healthcare when you hear the hype about AI. And I think that is going to change. The field of healthcare is coming together and working with the technologists and the people in the AI industry, whether it's computer scientists or other related professions, to figure out how we can do better chronic care management and how we can triage and diagnose issues, and or do diagnostic medicine, for example, right? There are companies and startups now which are investing heavily in devices like Alexa, but very heavily tuned for healthcare professionals, for very experienced doctors, and the device would sit next to them and triage and diagnose the problem alongside. And that's like an assistant working, but a non-human assistant working with them. So imagine you have these millions of radiology images in your database, and there's an assistant sitting next to the doctor, and a patient comes in, you have all this history already available. Doctor doesn't have to go through all these cases. The system can automatically perceive and sift through all these images and try to come up with some diagnostics which could help the doctor to make the case. So this is where we are going, and clinical decision support is already in place in many countries now. I hope India is also actually taking lead in some of those areas. So healthcare is really big. Now, the last one is actually my favorite. I think there is a whole field called AI for social good. And as engineers, we should start thinking about that. That how can we not just get good jobs, but also be able to get a job where we can do social good. Like, for example, jobs in public sector and social sector, right? And jobs around uh, information verification and validation, which is cybersecurity and infrastructure, right? AI has a lot of potential in these places. So you're not just building a recommendation system for Netflix. You are trying to figure out how these traditional areas with lots of data. I mean, if you look at our country now with the large population and what the government has been trying to do around data initiative and data governance, they're building these foundational capabilities so that you could 5 years, 6 years, 10 years down the lane, you could build advanced systems which could impact these areas like infrastructure for the company, grid infrastructure, or figure out how do you improve health services for people in rural areas. So there is a lot of opportunities there, and I think everyone should think about that. Everyone should think how their experience would help. All right, so next, moving on, I want to talk a little bit about what really, what are the pillars of AI in the purest sense, from the days of Alan Turing, who literally coined the term, and he's a pioneer in the field, built the Turing machine. A lot of the CS folks, I believe, would know about this. So essentially, there are these 5 things that we look for if we have to classify a machine as an AI, or say that the machine is, or a system or a computer is intelligent enough, and it's reaching that point where we can call it as a general AI. Learning is one thing. Reasoning, it's very important. That's actually the biggest piece right now missing in most advanced systems. Problem solving is another. We're getting there, but problem solving is a very complex process, even for humans. We have to break down sometimes large problems into small ones and then figure out how to solve the small ones and then bring back the solution for this large problem that we originally intended to solve. Perception. Perception is basically understanding your environment and taking cues from it. Humans do it very easily without any even consciously thinking about it. And language, language is probably the most natural thing that we start to learn even before perception. As a kid, perception is fully matured in kids up to 7 to 8 years, and they pick up the language much earlier. So these are the 5 areas, and different systems try to tackle these in different ways. And depending on the complexity of that autonomous system, you would need more than one, obviously, but not all systems can do all 5. And that's the holy grail. For example, an autonomous vehicle would be doing learning from the data that it has historically from the simulators, and it's doing some reasoning based on the modules that are doing perception for it. For example, the cameras or the depth sensors or the lidars that are on the vehicle. And these 3 things come together as a one solution. There's no language understanding there. There's a bit of a problem solving as a part of reinforcement learning. So when we go from the core areas that build the core pillars of AI, you go from there to core technologies that drive the AI forward. You're essentially looking at this whole evolution from machine learning, deep learning, reinforcement learning, computer vision, natural language processing, understanding, and speech processing and translation, right? And you see what I've tried to do here and fit them into these buckets. So for learning, you clearly have this machine learning and deep learning mix that is allowing you to do that and take on that pillar. You have a mix of deep learning and reinforcement learning, which is a slightly different flavor, trying to figure out reasoning and problem solving with the same data or the data that you may or may not have while you are interacting with your environment. And then computer vision truly goes to the perception side. And obviously there has been significant advances in natural language processing and understanding. NLP has been around for quite some time, but natural language understanding is fairly recent, probably 10 years in the making, where you are not just trying to process the text, you're trying to understand what it means. And that's very hard. Even humans sometimes can't read. There's multiple meanings of, can't read and understand fully, and because there are multiple meanings. And I think that's where we are really making good progress. Now, if I pause and look at why suddenly in last 8 to 10 years, we have seen the big explosion in talking points, in applications coming up, products being matured, and companies announcing like Google and Microsoft that they are the AI first company. It's because of 2 things. That there's an industrialization of all the AI platforms. So you hear a lot about AI platforms, going from these cloud companies, and there's the idea of democratization of AI. What does that mean? That it really basically means is AI is no longer some abstract concept or a thing or a system that only few experts can either access or understand or even develop systems for. So what it really means is companies are now trying to figure out ways to build systems from ground up and software from ground up so that people who have fundamental skills, but not necessarily all the experience to work with the AI systems or develop AI systems, can do that right out of the box. And that is what's driving this big push. And the idea is that this is what will take us forward. This is what will prepare the workforce, the new students, the students who have graduated in last few years, and they're trying to figure out how to get on this bandwagon. These 2 things would allow them to contribute much faster than what it used to. Okay, so now what I really want to talk about is the ground you here in reality. The reality is that you will hear a lot about very advanced skills that you need for machine learning, for be very good at building AI systems. You would hear about cloud technologies. You hear about things like Spark, just for data processing, and people just label that as AI enablement tool, maybe to a certain extent. But what really it boils down to is you need to have foundational skills. You already know these. I think everyone's a third or fourth year student, so they already know these basics. And unless you have these basics right, it doesn't matter what new areas pop up and you think you need to either take another degree or a certificate course. It doesn't matter. You need to have these foundations really solid. And this is your time in third and fourth year to make sure that you have them right. So you definitely have to have math done. You know, personally, I was not that good at math, actually. I always felt that my math was a weak area. But eventually, you know, I kept pushing, and I kept taking upon these areas which actually relied heavily on math. So I think I have not still conquered it, but I took that as a challenge that you have to deal with it. So get your linear algebra, calculus, probability, optimization all in place before you graduate, and continue to stay in touch with these foundational skills. Statistics and inference is very important. Actually, I realized after coming to US when I was in masters that I had really weak background in that. I can really say that here in front of everyone that to a certain extent, I don't think our curriculum prepared us to be very efficient in some of these areas. I know that I was really good at data structures and algorithms, but I was not really good at statistics and inference. And I really had to kind of bump up my effort to do that. And then there is this whole idea of efficient programming, which really means that you're not just solving dummy programs in C or C++. You're trying to really understand what your program flow is, how you deal with functions and objects. And it's not just for computer science students, it is for everyone right now. Everyone needs to know how to do good programming, if not very advanced, but you need to know how to do that because eventually everything is going to be like that. And so once you have these foundational skills, this is my opinion, and I think these discover a good range, then you have the foundation to go pick up anything else advanced. And the thing with advanced technology is like when I graduated, there was no concept of deep learning. In fact, I recall we had a great teacher, A.D. Kushwaha, back in the days, and he was in the fourth year my mentor for the bachelor's report. I did neural networks bachelor report back in 2005, and no one was thinking about it. And I thought just because I was interested in it, I'm going to do it. But there was no idea of deep learning at that time. But eventually, I could immediately connect that I've already done that, and so I know the basic concepts because my foundation was clear. I was able to pick up later on. So think from that perspective. Nothing goes waste when you're reading these foundational courses. All right, next. Next, I want to talk about like going beyond classroom. So you got your foundational skills in place. You make sure that during your 4 years, you're really acing those foundational skills. No slack. So you've done your best. But okay, that's not enough. A lot of people will tell you that's not enough. I think that's enough, but you still need to build your differentiator. So here are my tips to do that. How do you do that, right? And this has nothing to do with AI, but it really actually applies because the whole idea of AI is that AI research, AI development systems, or the products are maturing. So you actually can't say that what's the next thing beyond deep learning or what's the next thing that is coming in next 5 years, 6 years when you're really going into your workforce and be able to have a chance to jump on that bandwagon. So it applies to that as well. So tap into your core area. For example, for me, I was an electrical engineer, right? A lot of these guys around me were computer science majors. And what I felt was that when I went back to PhD, that, my first foray into electrical engineering was around control systems and control theory. But then I realized that a lot of the machine learning math, at least 1/3 of it, is built upon the concepts of control theory. So that's useful for me. When I went back, I looked at signal processing, and signal processing is actually heavily used in machine learning. Whether you're processing images or you're processing speech or you're processing images, it's all useful. It's all systems. It's all math. So don't think just because you're an electrical engineer you cannot have those skills. So tap into the specific areas. In fact, computer science majors are actually at a disadvantage because they don't understand some of the algorithms that the double E guys use either for circuits or for controls. And sometimes there's a reverse knowledge that double E's folks can bring into mix. So whatever your core area is, you tap into it and see how it gets applied to this machine learning and AI field. And there you will find a cross section, I'm sure, I guarantee you that, right? When you look for internships, trainings, jobs, carefully select these trainings and your jobs. When back in 2003, I did a summer training in Oil and Natural Gas Corporation of India, so ONGC, and we were in these plants trying to figure out all the control systems. We used to have this talk that why all this is not connected. 15 years fast forward, I'm in an oil and gas company where everything is connected. We are trying to get the data off of every asset and trying to build machine learning models to predict before they fail, right? So nothing goes waste. I didn't really carefully select the job, but I was careful enough that I like what I'm doing and I learned something about it. Don't be too careful because some things will surprise you. Just make sure that you do your best, you learn anything and everything, and identify any transferable skills, as I said. So if you're interested in going towards, ML and AI, identify what are the transferable skills that I can pick from any job or any training that I am doing and go from there. Find a mentor. I think Purnima does a great job in connecting with outside people and alumni and internally getting some focus groups. So find a mentor in your network, whether it's school or family, and ask questions. That's the best way to go about. Go into research if you're really interested in making change from the ground up and learn about these how are technologies like deep learning are evolving, what are we doing in perception, what are we doing, what is the world doing in problem solving, because all these are core pillars for AI. Find undergrad research opportunities or go to grad school and do some research. That's what really helped me. And read a lot, outside your outside your core area. Read quite a bit. I used to do that a lot and I still do, because it's hard to know everything. It's hard to keep track of what's changing around you and how fast these technologies are moving and how they're coming together. It's just so hard. I can't keep track of it. So I have to rely a lot on reading. Okay, so next slide. So this is my last slide. As I said, I would not go deep into any technical areas. We can certainly have a session if someone is interested, but I'm going to leave you with my general principles of success in career. And that applies all the more to AI and ML right now, because as I said, it's an evolving field. It's going to be here for 30 years. I said about this, get your fundamentals right and build a good foundation. You have few years before you graduate, make sure that you are using the best time to do this. Think about career that is not linear. Fields are changing. AI is going to involve how companies perceive their other skill sets are going to involve. So roughly there is about 53 million. There's a survey that there's 53 million AI professionals needed in next 10 years. And right now we only have 500,000. So there's a huge gap. So don't think that it's going to be a linear drive. You go from here to here to here and just up the ladder. That's not going to work. So you figure out what's your non-linear path and go with that. Essentially what that means is, when we do 4 years of engineering, we go pretty broad. Even though we are doing electrical engineering, we are learning everything about electrical engineering. Then somebody goes to master's or do something else in a specific job, we go into depth. And then what I believe is you have to come out of it and you have to go breadth again to figure out that where are the things that I've learned now apply broadly. And you have to do this cycle multiple times in your career. You start broader, go into a deep area that you selected, learn all about it, get your concepts clear, and then come back up and say, okay, how can I apply it to broader areas? And then keep doing this. So that would help you transfer skills from one job to the other and one area to the other. And that's what's going to matter. Because no one knows actually right now what are the best skills for AI right now. They will claim, but they won't know it. 5 years later, they wouldn't know that at all. So what you're going to do is transfer those skills over the years. Build capabilities, earn respect, and don't worry about the money. It's a cliche, but it's true. It will follow if you do these things. This at least works for me. And at the end of the day, make sure that you are remembering to help others achieve their goals, because it all comes back. If you're doing all these things but you're not helping your friends or your colleagues or the people that you would work in future, anyone who comes to you who requires help, whether to figure out which career they should take, how should they decide on a job offer, just help them out. And I think that's the best way to maximize your impact on the world. Dr. Upload, I am done here. As I said, I wanted to leave time for the Q&A, and I can answer any specific questions now, and you can open it up.
Yeah, there are a few questions. So should I start presenting those questions?
Yes, please.
Yeah, one of the question is how are we supposed to start with AI, machine learning, and data science during college itself?
Well, my first answer would be make sure that you have these foundational skills. These are your standard courses. If some of these areas are not covered, which I'm pretty sure are covered in your courses, make sure that you are going a little bit out of your way, either taking courses online or making a request to the faculty that we need to cover these areas and they are not well covered. Make sure that's the first step. And the second is, if there are summer trainings that you still can do and internships that you can still do, make sure you try to find a good match there from the network or from where your placement cell can help. These days, there's a lot of material online available, and I think Purnima College could help you locate that. If not, then you can tap into the alumni's. I can certainly direct through few resources, and that would help you. One last thing I would say, if you're a bit of an entrepreneur, this is something I did during the college time. I took on projects on the side. I tapped into my network, and there were some programming projects at that time. We were not thinking about machine learning too much. So I did that. I was doing some side projects while I was a student. So if you can think, you can take these pro bono projects or use competitions like Kaggle to get yourself hands dirty a little bit and get some experience, you should do that.
Okay. Thanks. And one more question I have is, like when we talk about data, this machine learning and artificial intelligence, we generally talk about working for social causes. But the biggest problem which generally is faced in this is the data, because the data is not available for such causes. So can you just give a direction that from how we can get such data, or should we go for a collection of primary data?
Okay, I hope I understood the question. Not sure from a social causes perspective, but let me answer that. When you hear a lot about the data and the necessity of it, it is primarily stemming from a fact that we are still pretty early in figuring out the first pillar of the AI, which is learning, right? And to some level, perception. Now, as we actually go a little bit further and advance, there has been work to figure out that you can't always have data for all scenarios. This is where sort of reinforcement learning comes to, right? This is a human way of learning, that I'm going to interact with my environment, I'm going to take an action, and I'm going to figure something out, and I'm going to get some feedback. But I'm not sure if it applies to your area of social cause that you mentioned, but there has been definite work in in figuring out how ML can be used where there is not enough data, and what are those types of problems. You have to figure that what those problems that you can actually solve. But to your point, the discussion about necessity of data is primarily because we are still in this whole phase of machine learning and deep learning, which requires a lot of data. As we go further, a little bit beyond that, the problem still needs to be tackled, and maybe that's a good area for you to do some research.
Okay, thanks. If anybody else have any queries, they can just type in. One more thing I wanted to understand, that when we talk about going from India to abroad for studies and everything, it is generally through GRE. Is there any other channel to go for higher studies except through GRE?
That is the primary channel, as per my knowledge. And I think that's a good channel because most reputed universities where you would want to go and do some work would require you to do GRE. And I think it's a good exam. It has evolved quite a bit since I've last given it many years ago. But I think that's the only one I know of.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have only a few queries. No more queries are coming in. So let us wait for a minute. If anybody wants to ask, yeah, we have. What skills in field of electrical engineering has better impact on data science and future?
Okay. I think beyond the core fundamental skills that I mentioned, because we all learn, good amount of math and good amount of statistics and probability. I think the most important that has been useful for me has been control theory, signal processing, and to quite a bit of extent systems engineering. So, for example, there is a whole need of I won't say it's for data science, but for machine learning specifically, there's a whole area of machine learning for the edge. That means building actually lightweight machine learning models from distributed data at the edge devices. And actually what I've seen is the EE folks are much better prepared to understand that, especially someone in the electrical engineering field who has done work in computer architecture side or circuit side, right? There's another angle to it to think about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Let me finish, Dr.
Yeah,
Chhabra. There's another angle to think about it. Is I spent a couple of years working for utility companies. That means the ones that manage the electricity grid here. Now, those are very hardcore fields for electrical engineers: transformers, cables, grid hierarchy, and all that stuff, right? We were getting data from the national grid, and to make sense of how trips happened and how some of the outages happen in the grid, what are the instruments that are behind it, where there's a fault, how the circuit mechanism works. Although we were doing data science for them, it really helped to understand the domain. So you have to think from that perspective that not every data scientist, because data scientist comes from very different fields. Somebody who's coming from biology or from genetics or from computer science may have no understanding of how electric grid works. But electrical engineer who's become a data scientist has an understanding of that, and he can play a very big role. And I think that's a part that I kind of missed, that if you look at purely from data science perspective, not ML AI, the data science is becoming more and more domain specific. So there's a whole debate about generalists and specialist data scientists. So if you are looking at companies who are in this field and trying to do data science, your domain expertise could actually be your differentiator if you can pick up the data science skill along with it.
Okay, I think that sounds very good. Yeah, one more message is there. I'm not sure what the person wants to ask, but some students are not good at getting marks, but they have some talent like in machine and computer. So I suppose he wants to understand that if a student is not good at getting marks, do have a better future prospects or not. That is what I could assume from that statement.
Okay. Well, I think it. I don't know what good here means, to be very honest. And I think if you always get, at least good enough marks to.
We are not able to hear you. There's some problem, I suppose.
Can you hear me now better?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay. I was saying that I think there are good enough marks to make sure that you're learning as well as you are, meeting the requirements for moving forward in your course. I never had good marks actually. So good in the sense whatever people define good for it. For me, it was good enough for me. But that doesn't mean you should follow me. But my point here is focus on learning, and also focus on making sure that you have at least decent marks so that you can clear the systems that you need to clear. But the focus definitely should be on fundamentals. And if you have done that, eventually, I think there would be a right place where you would be able to showcase what you have learned.
Yeah, I think I have some message. Yeah, I think you can go ahead with whatever you are asking. Definitely,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, I think one more question is there. From where should I start learning AI specifically if I have good programming knowledge?
I would say start with the. Let's go back here a little bit. If you have no experience in machine learning, you have good programming, make sure that you understand the math behind machine learning, and then learn machine learning as your first step, and then potentially go and understand deep learning. A lot of people these days who are new to the field are trying to actually skip that step. They hear a lot about deep learning and they go directly to deep learning. And these are slightly different methods, but I think if I have to suggest, it would be better to learn the classical techniques first, which have been around for many decades, and then venture into deep learning and additional adjacent areas to build your experience. Now, once you do machine learning and deep learning, the idea would be to pick a specific subspecialty in it to continue your learning process, whether it's computer vision, natural language processing, or anything else, so that you can apply the skills that you learned in machine learning and deep learning to solve the problems in those domains.
Okay, there's one more question. Sir, the person is asking, sir, want to suggest, can you suggest some sort of books?
Yes, I can suggest some sort of books. How about, can we do this, Dr. Chaplot? Can I actually create a whole resource list and maybe you can circulate to students?
Definitely, sir.
Offline.
Yeah, I can always do that. I will circulate those lists. Then we have one more question. What is more important in AI, good programming skills or good technological skills with decent programming?
I am not sure what technological skills here mean and what the person is referring to. Programming is definitely good, but I would rank your maths and your statistical and probability skills above programming. All of them are necessary if you want to go in this field, but make sure your foundations on the mathematical constructs are clear. That is the biggest mistake I see people making, skipping directly that and going directly to programming. You can do it, but if you really want to understand fundamentally how these things work, you have to understand the math.
Okay, thank you, sir. So there is one more one. It is not a question. It is just that it is not a question. I just want to say that I am very thankful to Purnima College that I got a chance to listen to Mr. Nikhil Gulati. Thank you very much, sir. So he is
My
feeling
pleasure.
very
Thank
delighted.
you.
Yeah. Any other queries are there? Then you can type in. So I think we are done with the questions on QA board also and in the chat window also. So should we proceed further, sir?
Yep, I think I'm done with my slides, Dr. Chapter.
Okay. So all students are requested that if they have any queries, they can always forward us, and we can communicate with sir and get your problems resolved if you are not able to you are not able to type in right now or query right now. So I'm quite sure that this session must have been very fruitful for the students, and the knowledge imparted from the Dr. Nikhil would have given guidance to the students for the future steps they should take to go further in this data science field and how they should work so that they can be successful in the future. They can be successful in future. And one more thing I would like to add over here is that yes, Dr. Rekha Nair ma'am has been a source of a key person to make this webinar executed properly and efficiently, and she has been the reason behind execution of this wonderful webinar. I'm quite sure that the knowledge imparted by our eminent speakers is going to help you all a lot. So as we come near to the conclusion of the wonderful session, I would like to invite Ms. Ekta Sharma to propose the vote of thanks.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. A warm and graceful morning to our most valued guest and today's expert, Mr. Nikhil Gulati, and also management committee, faculty members, and students. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks and acknowledge the gathering today. On behalf of Purnima College of Engineering and entire fraternity of institution, first of all, I extend my most sincere thanks to Almighty God for making today's event a resounding success.
Ma'am, you have muted yourself by mistake, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. A warm and graceful morning to our most valued guest and today's expert, Mr. Nikhil Gulati, Management Committee, faculty members, and students. It's my privilege to propose vote of thanks and acknowledge today's gathering. On behalf of Purnima College of Engineering and entire fraternity of the institution, first of all, I extend my most sincere thanks to the Almighty God for making today's event a resounding success. At the outset, I would like to thank Mr. Nikhil Gulati, today's guest and resource person. Nikhil, thank you. Thank you for sparing your time and accepting our invitation. Thank you so much. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence. We are thankful to our Honorable Director and Principal, Dr. Mahesh Bundele, for his presence and support. My special thanks goes to Dr. Rekha Nair, Dean, for her enthusiastic support and inviting Mr. Nikhil Lati for presenting such a knowledgeable session. I would also like to thank Dr. Surendra Yadav, HOD CS, and Dr. Virendra Santhani, HOD EE, for their constant support. A special thanks to Shivraj sir for always being there and providing technical support whenever needed. My heartfelt thanks to our students for their active participation. Last but not the least, I would like to thank Dr. Neelam Chaplod for being such a good supportive and organizing this webinar successfully. With these warm words and a kind message, we move to the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ekta ma'am, and thank you for your message. Once again, I want to thank everyone who was behind organizing this. I want to say special thanks to our former director, who always we will call Director Sir, Director Singhi, and for us to actually for bringing us to the Purnima community. I don't call it as a college, but Purnima community, and I hope that everyone will stay safe and healthy in these times, and hopefully these restrictions would get lifted soon, and we can actually visit the college sometime next year.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here, and thanks a lot, sir, for taking out your precious time and being with us and guiding our it is your, in fact it is your organization, so guiding the students of the organizations, and we always will be really happy to have you for various sessions with us. So thanks a lot. Thank you, Ekta ma'am. Thank you, sir, principal sir, and every other person who was involved in this particular